Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 here. Excited for this panel today. Maybe we can start with some quick introductions.
Hi everyone. I'm Tess O'Brien from FreeWheel. FreeWheel is an advertising technology business that supports both buyers and sellers. We're really focused on connecting buyers and sellers and monetizing the world of streaming and CTV. In my role at FreeWheel, I lead all of our buy-side platforms, which includes our DSP and our agency management system.
Perfect, yeah. Hi, I'm Prashant Chaudhary. I'm from Amagi. We power broadcasters, content owners, and platforms to bring their content online. So we are essentially powering all the fast, 50% of the fast universe in the world. Any of all the channels that you see on the fast platforms, roughly half of them are powered by us. And I actually lead the monetization product group there. So I'm here to talk about monetization and anything related to measurement of advertising. So.
Hello everyone, I'm George Carnes. I'm with Samsung Ads. I lead the data insights at Samsung Ads. I work with an amazing team of analysts. We sit on top of the world's largest smart TV opt-in TV viewership data on consumers. We use that data to help inform brand advertisers and publishers in terms of informing their media strategies, and that includes advertising on a free ad-supported streaming service that comes with your Samsung TV called Samsung TV Plus. It's got 350 channels of live free TV, as well as thousands of on-demand shows and videos for consumers.
We do help with a number of those. Yeah.
Yes, we do work together on FAST.
That's awesome. And I'm Diane Strutner. I'm the founder and CEO of Datazoom, and we're an enterprise data as a service platform. So we are capturing, processing, and delivering all of your first-party and user experience data in real time to support analytics and advertising and many other things too. So great. So yeah, the topic of today is really understanding the CTV ad measurement space and really diving into the metrics that are supporting the evolution into cross-platform media buying. We had a slide that I mistakenly didn't send to Dan, so I'm sorry, but it was setting the terminologies for different places where we're streaming content, defining streaming, defining CTV, and defining also the sources of data, things like pixels and tags, other third-party sources, and Dan can send this off after the show. But to get into the first topic of the day, I guess actually before we get into there, what is everybody watching? What are they watching today on their streaming services?
I think it's me. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's all good.
I'll stop moving. What are we watching?
What are we watching?
Okay. So I've just returned from mat leave, and I was definitely binging a lot while I was with my newborn baby. Loved, absolutely gobbled up every single episode of the latest True Detective. Highly recommend for everyone.
Yes.
Jodie Foster is incredible. But my guilty pleasure, which I think is the key word in your question.
Yes, the guilty pleasure.
Is Below Deck.
Yes.
I cannot recommend it enough. It is
It's
just
so freaking good.
It is so good. I don't know how they cast it. It's magic. I love the captain. I've never been less interested in hiring a super yacht or chartering a super yacht. Sorry, that's the terminology. Because it looks stressful, but God, it makes for good TV on Peacock.
I love it. What about you?
Right, yeah, for me, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So it recently came on Netflix again. So yeah, first 4 seasons. So I just finished that 3 days ago. So
funny.
Yeah, so funny. Yeah, and with the Andre Braugher passing away, so that's a homage for me. Whatever I can do, yeah. So watching it, phenomenal show.
I'm probably guilty of being behind a little bit, but I'm on season 6 of 9 of Suits. And you talk about a great example of quality network content that I probably never would have watched because it came out in 2011. But now that it's gone into a streaming environment, it has all the benefits of video on demand. Definitely recommend it. It's like Houdini lawyers. Every episode is extremely riveting. So,
All right.
And I've been watching Call the Midwife, and it makes me appreciate the marvels of modern medicine. And also, I can't believe my mom had twins. So, anyway.
That has a cult following.
Yeah. It is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, and they show a lot in there, so interesting. Okay, so we wanted to group some of these questions today. We want to start with, let's discuss the needs, wants, desires, concerns, and challenges of the buy side. And what are the metrics we're looking at? What are we measuring? What are we going to try and do? What do we need to do? What are we trying to do better?
I can start. So, look, CTV has such incredible promise for buyers. We've already seen a significant shift in terms of viewership to CTV and streaming platforms, and buyers are really looking to understand how they can reach the right audiences at the right time and deliver the most effective messages that eventually obviously drive outcomes. In terms of the metrics that they're measuring against, I mean, I think it really depends on what the marketing objectives are of that advertiser. So sometimes they're really just focused on impressions and reach and frequency. In other situations, they're more focused on, cost per user acquisition or like specific results. So, there's a lot of different opportunities that are available. So I think for buyers, a lot of kind of interest. We've seen a significant amount of demand already, but we'll get into the challenges in a minute.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
No, please.
All right. Yeah. So one thing that has always been true for most of the advertisers has been they run campaigns everywhere, from social media to online to mobile to TV, to connected TV, to streaming TV, to FAST. The biggest challenge that they have been facing, and the biggest needs, and it's remained persistent, is figuring out how to do omnichannel measurement and figuring out how if you're running a single campaign across all these channels, how do you measure effectiveness across each one of those? And so you know that which one actually attributed the most, which one contributed the most to you. So that's one thing. Actually, if I have to pick one, that would be the very biggest one. They're still struggling with that. There are models for these things, but they are still evolving. As the landscape evolves on how you're delivering the media itself, their needs are evolving as well, and they're always behind. So there is always a need for finding more accurate measurement. I guess that's why we're here anyway, so talk about it. Yep.
Well, even omni-channel within TV of cross-platform.
Yeah,
so if you think of, if you're an advertiser and you talk about your needs, if you're spending, whether it's hundreds of thousands or tens of millions on an advertising campaign, you need data, you need measurement to know whether it's working or it's not working, or how do you adjust to really optimize it. And as Tess pointed out, depending upon what your marketing objective is, it determines, what are the metrics that I'm going to use. At Samsung Ads, we'll work with advertisers that it is about upper funnel reach. And it's not just reach, but it's target reach. Back in the day, it could be target reach to a demographic audience. Now it might be reach to a high value audience, someone who's in market for an automobile. And when you talk about impressions, it could be things about, am I getting enough impressions to really get that audience to make that action to drive whatever it is that's important to me as a marketer. And it moves down. Brand metrics around, I'm launching a new brand, I'm looking at brand awareness, or I'm launching a new campaign around a message. It could be message retention, to mid-funnel metrics now of engagement. And now, because TV being a digital medium, there is just so much more you can do down funnel around, whether it's trying to understand someone going to my website. In the case of us, we'll work with advertisers on cost per quote in the FinServ marketplace for insurance, to in-store visitation, to ultimately totally down funnel in terms of sales lift. Did it actually drive sales? But when you think about the challenges that they deal with right now, it's kind of like the good news, bad news. The good news is you have all of this data and all of this metrics that you've never had in the history of TV. And the bad news is you have all of this data and metrics that you've never had in TV, and which are the right ones to use? And so it does go back to, looking at the measurement partners. They have different data sets. They're using different methodologies. Which are the ones that is going to help best answer the marketing objective that I have, whether it's something up funnel, mid funnel, or down funnel?
So I was going to add something. So there are fundamentally 4 things that you can measure. There are maybe more. One is brand awareness, of course, then lead generation. The third one is return on ad spend. The fourth one is tune-in, which is for, all of those are similar, but they are very, very different. Like you said, different kinds of data sets, and we're going to get deeper into that, I guess. Yeah. But needs are very, very different. The models are very, very different. So you have to be on top of your game if you are a buy-side player in the field to know what to actually measure and how to measure that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've discussed is that there's now, we can track so much more than ever before, which is exciting. But, as George was saying, it's like, what metrics should I be following? Which ones are leading me, to false insights or correct insights, and distinguishing all of that. And a lot of that comes down to the data that we're using. So, in the slide that I failed to prepare here, we talked about different sources of data, but what are some of these big data sets that we're using on, to transact today that are becoming important in this new omni-channel cross-platform buying environment?
If I can start by talking about the data that we're using to target and transact. I think we've seen a significant shift towards first-party data as we kind of move into kind of a post-cookie world. And so I think that's kind of been the biggest trend that we've seen with both our buyers as well as our sellers on platform. FreeWheel recently launched an identity network, which works to kind of collate all the universal identifiers across the ecosystem, fully interoperable to allow kind of both kind of parties on each of our platforms to monetize and kind of bring two different data sets together in a privacy, safe, compliant manner. So I think that's kind of been the biggest kind of trend we've seen to kind of tackle that challenge with like, what's the right data that we should be using to identify the right audiences.
You take on the next.
Yeah, and to that point of first-party data, again, going back to what's important to measure, if you look at some advertisers, they're looking at reach, getting as much reach to their target as possible. And they're looking at that with their first-party data. So first of all, how many of them can be reached on different platforms? And then the second thing is not only understanding that first-party audience and who you can reach, but then when you launch your campaign, it's understanding not only who are you reaching, but because it's now digital in nature, and with big data sets, whether it's set-top box data, whether it's smart TV data, you get a full spectrum of the audiences that you're reaching in a linear environment, that you're reaching in a CTV environment, that you're reaching in both environments. We've looked at thousands of campaigns, looking at advertisers' target audiences. And what's surprisingly is because of this complexity in the fragmentation is advertisers on average, they're missing 40% of their target audiences, which is huge. I mean, that means more customers, more brand loyalty, everything that goes with that. Mm-hmm. So that's where you can use these big data sets to understand not only who are you reaching, who are you missing, how do you re-aggregate them as an audience, and where can they be reached, whether that be in platforms like free ad-supported streaming services or where those audiences are moving towards.
One thing I'd add is, so you got the identity, you got the how you are reaching and find the audiences correctly, and then it's the performance itself. So there are companies who actually operate in the space, credit card information or loyalty card data. So did you end up buying the product or not? So you saw something on TV and did you end up going to the store? So as TV becomes more digital, or as TV becomes more addressable, is a word that we actually, I don't know if you want to use that, addressable, or as targetable, then that loyalty card or credit card information becomes important, where you can measure the effectiveness of a campaign. Tune in is a little bit easier. I think companies like Samsung have a lot of quality data where they can actually just know, hey, do you tune into the show later on? It's because you actually have that in-house as well. So those are the data. You can start with our targeting, and then you go to the effectiveness there, and then the final one is like, hey, did it perform or not? So these are, again, multiple companies. I think Tess may actually know more about that than anybody else and how many different data sets are available, but there are literally thousands of them. Not everything is the same. So you have to pick and choose based on what you're looking for. So you, again, the pressure is on the buy side to figure out what your objectives are and then finding the right data set that meets the needs.
Only other thing that I'd love to add in terms of like the challenges that we're seeing from buyers, I think the data that they're receiving to actually measure the value of an impression is particularly difficult, especially if you're transacting in programmatic environments, which a lot of this kind of purchase behavior is kind of shifting towards as well. And so we've seen, a significant shift in kind of the conversation around supply path optimization and how buyers can understand how supply is being surfaced through different SSPs, and then how they can actually kind of value that supply based on, again, their marketing objectives and what they're trying to achieve. But I feel a need to add that in there because measurement is one thing, but the way that you're actually transacting on it is another.
Yes.
How you value the impression itself.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the data that they receive, which brings me to the next topic here, which is when you're selling ad space, you're now responsible for providing so much more information and insight than you ever have before. You're being asked to use all of these third-party tools to provide measurement, to have an unbiased opinion of impressions and viewability and attention and all its other information that the buy side is requiring from us. What are some of the core metrics that the publishers are looking for that you see in your business to help them understand how their content's performing, how their users are engaging, and how they can maximize their own revenue through selling advertising?
And I'll take that. If you think about the importance of data and measurement, certainly important for buyers, but it might even be more important for sellers because I think there's more use cases that they need it for.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to prove out the efficacy of the advertising on your platform. So what is your contribution as a media owner to all of those metrics that we just talked about for advertisers that are important to them, and to being able to demonstrate that? And whether that's using third-party measurement that measures you, whether that's your own first-party data that you can bring into the ecosystem that advertisers can use and match their first-party data to, that's all important. But aside from really proving out the efficacy of your advertising, they also have to make decisions around content investment. What content are my users engaging with, and which of those audiences that are engaging with which content? Because engagement is really about how am I going to retain my subscriber base. Engagement is also about more time spent with my app, and as we know, as more apps are moving into streaming environments, ad-supported streaming environments, time is money. It's more ad dollars. So that's important. And I think being an OEM, Samsung, we're in a unique position where we're able to see this viewership across all different platforms. And so we know what content that they're engaging with. And a lot of publishers, they'll have their own first-party data, but what they might not have visibility into and where they need data partnerships is to be able to understand what are their consumers consuming even outside of their platform to get a holistic view of them. What other content genres important to them? And so I think that becomes an area where data partners become important. And then lastly, publishers are advertisers. They too have those same needs as a brand advertiser. And they're trying to drive, whether it's tune into their content in a linear environment, whether it's trying to drive app usage, or even within app usage, it could be about help me get more subscriptions to my app. And it could be, I just acquired sports league content, just got the rights to it as an app owner. How can I build new subscribers to my app knowing that I'm gonna have to monetize that content? Having data like, well, who are those consumers that are consuming that data on other platforms today, like in linear? Being able to have that and go after those audiences with targeted app offerings. Those are the kinds of things that smart TV data can do. It can get down to lower funnel performance to help them understand when you target those audiences, what messages are resonating with them, who are converting, who's now subscribing to your app to the first time. And increasingly, what we're seeing too on the sell side is it's not only about subscriber acquisition, but it's about retention and engagement. I mean, we study the movement of consumers across apps on a TV, and it's astonishing. This is based on usage data, but there are 8 times as many app owners that have used an app in a given year that have churned out than there are the number of active users within an app. And so being able to help these app owners understand and address that of, who are the samplers and light users that you're bringing into your app? How do you ladder them up? How do you understand their content behavior and be able to market them and move them up? Or who's at risk? Who might be someone who's used your app month over month or week over week that's now their usage is going down? How do you remind them of the strong content library that you have? Or maybe you watch season 1 and you're trying to get them to watch season 2. That's the kind of data that can help these app owners address these issues around shifting consumer behavior.
I'll say that, when we work with customers at Datazoom, some questions we get are like, what is my most popular content in terms of the revenue earned against a specific title or on a page or a section of my site? A genre, how much money has a specific user earned us, or cohort of users? Where did the user come from? When the user churned, did they churn because, hey, we changed our ad load to include more ads? Did we show too many ads of the same kind at the same users? It's really a difficult balancing act, I think, for publishers these days who are trying to, they have an inconsistent revenue stream when it's coming from advertising. and they're trying to balance that while learning more about, holistically, how are they going to retain users on their platform and how are they going to attract new audiences. So, I think in terms of the data that's required, I mean, anything can happen when you're looking at information from the publisher side. But for example, did an ad fail to load and that caused the user to churn out of the user experience, and therefore we didn't get the monetization tracked for that ad, and maybe I'm going to go think that this is not a suitable ad for that specific user. There's just so many things, I think, on the data side that publishers need to be tracking in order to have a holistic picture of this whole space here.
If you're a publisher, you cannot track these things by yourself. So always work with one or more companies who can actually provide you this information. What you just mentioned, we call it slate. I mean, when an ad part.
I think it's me.
Yeah. When an ad part comes up, it's a 2-minute part, and the ads are playing. It plays for 1 minute, 15 seconds, and then there is a slate. We call it slate, where screen goes blank or says "will be back shortly."
Yeah.
That's when users churn, and we have internal data which suggests like the drop-off could be up to 20%.
Wow.
And then if you can figure out a way to compress the pod or do something with it, then the user is going to last longer. That means you're going to get to the next ad pod also. So for publisher side, for the sell side, you are likely to make more money, monetize it better actually, because the user is going to stay longer for the next 8 minutes or till you get to the next pod. But yeah, that's a major challenge here.
Yeah.
But, so that's why work with companies who actually give you this information, who can tell you these things, so you can actually do more effective monetization. On top of it, what you just said, I mean, how do you actually, what content to produce, what content to acquire, all of that goes back into how you are actually building your business. So find the partners that actually give you this kind of information.
I'd love to add to that, just because I think that this really emphasizes the importance of just getting the basics right in CTV and focusing on the user experience. There's so many things to get excited about in this space, but I think actually nailing exactly kind of like your pod setup, your frequency, things like that, preventing slate, working with reputable providers, I think is really important just to get like the basics right before you go and kind of do some of the more exciting things.
Yes.
And that's me with my FreeWheel ad server hat on.
And that requires a lot of data.
Yes.
To figure that out.
And the ability to set up the controls that you want for how you want to manage your business and kind of where you're willing to kind of flex and where you're not.
Yes.
There's always a lot of data. You just need to find the way to interpret it correctly, and that's where whoever you're working with, the partners, data partners, who can make it easy for you to understand it, that becomes most important.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think they're also, the user experience is very important. And for the publisher who's an advertiser, they're trying to test different, what are the offers that are really resonating with my consumers? And is it the $199 for 4 months, and that you then move into the full subscription? Is it $499 for 6 months and then you move, or is it, $10.99 for the full year? They have the ability to test these different offers to see what's working with consumers and to be able to optimize against that. So data is a critical component of that.
So this one, sorry.
Oh no, I feel like this is a good opportunity to talk about the rise of FAST and just how much that part of the ecosystem has grown. Our most recent estimate, at least what FreeWheel sees through our platform, 25% of viewership is across FAST apps. And so there's been kind of a huge shift from kind of that world of like starting with subscription, and I think that that's only going to evolve. And you see kind of some of the offerings from platforms like Peacock that have kind of very specialized like advertising experiences. They also have kind of different tiers as well. I'm excited to see how that evolves over the next couple of years.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about performance TV. And I guess for the audience here, if one of you could define what performance TV is, and then also how that's impacting how we're buying and measuring ad campaigns. Anyone?
I can define it. It's the ability to bring kind of full funnel metrics into a TV campaign. So bringing kind of the precision of targeting and then the scale of TV together. Very excited to see a lot of businesses really nailing this. I think about our partners at Mountain, our clients at Mountain and TV Scientific, who I think are kind of pioneers in this space and really kind of leading the charge and really working to democratize access to CTV advertising across a range of different buyers.
So what are we measuring when it comes to performance TV?
So there was some element of performance TV has been there for 20 years or longer. I mean, infomercials, when they were running infomercials, typically it's a phone number that you call, and then it's a direct to consumer. They usually not run a national spot. Usually they would run local or state level or zip code level parts. But yeah, so that has been around, and they were literally measuring the effectiveness of how many people called. So lead generations or actual sales itself. So you're selling an insurance package or like $19.99 versus $4.99, whatever. I mean, so they may have two different offers, and see you figure it out. It's actually fundamentally remains the same. Performance TV is still the same. I'm trying to figure out its lower funnel conversion metrics. So whether it's lead generation or something or actual sale itself. And there are companies who are doing that. I mean, in TV, it's a little bit harder as TV becomes more digital. Now you can actually do hyper focus. That's where you were talking about the TV side effect. Companies can I talk about what they do? I mean, So essentially, I mean, you you can run an ad anywhere, even on a legacy TV, and they will say, hey, you ran the spot in this zone, and then they were going to monitor the traffic from that particular DMA or that region, the traffic to a website. It actually ended up going 5% more than the rest of the universe, so they know that it actually led to effectiveness. So that's how it's a little bit harder to actually measure the actual conversion, because unless you are scanning a QR code. So this is where the QR codes and L bands, all those the new ad formats come in, where you can do that and actually do one-to-one measurement also. So it's becoming much more easy the way we used to do it on the digital side. I mean, go to website, click here, buy something, and we track the using cookies. We don't have the cookies, but yeah, we are getting better at that. And that's why you see more D2C brands pushing and stuff into the performance TV universe as well.
Yeah, I think Tess hit it when you said the word democratization. Right. CTV and addressable TV has really democratized performance TV, and yeah, you don't have to show up now with tens of millions of dollars to broadcast your message anymore, or be relegated to late night remnant inventory with the chicken rotisserie and the knives. But to steal a phrase from maybe Liberty Mutual, you can only pay for what you need, because you can now find your audiences whenever and wherever they are on a one-to-one basis, and whether that be in a free ad-supported streaming environment or whatnot. And there's always been measurability, you're right. And I remember back in the day, it was direct TV is what it was called, direct response TV. And they would run, advertisers would run across different markets, and they would watermark their ads. And what that did is every time, and that was during the days of linear, so it was scheduled TV and scheduled spots. And they would compare, well, when did all of my ad occurrences hit? And when did the 800 numbers start to ring? And that's how they did the correlation. But now with one-to-one targeting of this, you have to use different approaches. Right. And fortunately, it's available. It's digital TV, so you can, whether you're working with an MMP, a media measurement partner, who is putting a tag or a pixel inside of the ad itself, so all of those exposures are going back to a server, and then you can match that up with first-party data from the advertiser themselves to see through a device graph who's being exposed and how is it being converted or not. So it's just a lot more sophisticated now in how you can measure it.
And probably identity is a key part to performance TV, and building out identity spines, identifying the same users across emails and devices and different CTV apps.
Yeah, there's a couple of different use cases as well. Like there's like a retargeting use case where you're just continuing a campaign on that might have started in digital, and then you're kind of tracking that user in other environments. But I love you connecting it to the history of direct response, which has always been a really important vehicle. This is evolving it in a totally different way, in a really exciting way.
Online. Sorry, go ahead. No, I was saying online used to be cost per CPM basis advertising, and CPC, CPA basis, cost per acquisition. TV has always been CPM. We are actually piloting something with a company called Canela Media based out in Los Angeles. CPA advertising on TV itself. Again, direct response. So we're because of FAST, we can actually stitch an individual ad unit to individual people and then measure the effectiveness of those things. So, and it's going to pay out on a CPA basis. So we're going to it's a pilot program. We're going to run that and figure out how effective that is. So again, different ways of monetizing as well. If you have dead space, as a publisher, if you don't actually have a programmatic buy or something supporting it, maybe this is a way to backfill something and try it out and see how that works.
This is the other thing I think that's really interesting about this particular space is that it's bringing kind of the ability to optimize a campaign that's in flight. And you hit on it when you mentioned the ability to do this programmatically, and that's really what we're powering through our platform. And so it's, you set up your campaign at the beginning, but then you are monitoring the results in real time to make sure that you're kind of moving your campaign based on kind of how things are performing. That I think is a really, really interesting next frontier.
It was hard in TV, and now it's becoming very, very common. So that's what that's the message essentially.
Just
we're trying to,
totally. It just requires incredibly complex kind of performance-based algorithms to make sure that it's done in the right way.
I think from the buy side, there's a lot of real-time information. I will speak on behalf of the sell side. There's not a lot of real-time information. So if you put a campaign out there, you're often waiting, days or weeks sometimes to get reports back from third-party measurement tools and from your ad server. And so if you're a publisher trying to protect the precious audience and ad slots that you have, I do think that's a really interesting area of improvement is how can we get faster data back to the publisher so they can do their part in hopefully helping the advertisers, hit effectively, but also make sure that, they're maximizing the value they get out of their content.
So 10 years ago in TV universe, this was very, very hard. Nobody would share the information back till like 6 months after the campaign ended. That's when you measured what happened. And, now it's not real time yet, but I think you can get in a day or two with some lag that okay, this is what is working, this is what is not working. I think in the next few years we'll get to almost real time or just real time. So that's the hope.
I agree, because I think now with machine learning, you can put that to work on behalf of an advertiser. And you could start to understand, not only can you use it to give more scale to your advertiser for their audience that they're trying to reach, maybe they have, some seeds of these are the audience on your platform. Can you take that and can you expand it to a bigger target audience? But then as you're looking at the performance of those audiences, so in our case on CTV, we're working with publishers and app owners. We'll start to understand, okay, as you're trying to go after a new subscriber acquisition campaign, who are those audiences that are now converting, that are now coming to your app, downloading it for the first time and engaging with your content? How do we understand what are the characteristics of those audiences? What are the kind of content do they watch? What day parts are they watching? How do you stitch that all together to then help that advertiser optimize their performance of let's find more like them and target them?
So you can run those almost on autopilot to some extent. Doesn't mean the campaign manager's job go away. It evolves into something bigger and trying to figure out what the macro trends are. But micro trends you don't need to monitor on minute by minute or a day by day basis. There are algorithms so we can take care of that. So.
All right, let's talk about trends. So the business model, I think, in this industry is changing a lot. We're seeing a lot of move from subscription-based services to ad-supported services. What are some of the impactful trends that you're seeing in terms of how advertisers are now making ad buys with this move to advertising? I guess we also can talk about things like local versus national, different types of currencies that we're using. What are some of the trends that you're seeing at the moment that are impacting ad buying and how are we measuring it?
I think the first one is, and it talks about in the title, the complexity of cross-platform buying is, when Netflix and some of the ad-free viewing environments came out, marketers were like, oh shit, what am I going to do? Mass amounts of consumers and consumer time is now moving to these ad-free environments. How am I going to reach my audiences? And I think what we've seen is certainly, through the pandemic, huge investment into content libraries, a lot more companies, including the networks, coming into the streaming space, and frankly, making investments, losing lots of money to gain subscribership. And that had to change. And we've seen it change. I mean, obviously, you've seen the likes of, Netflix and HBO Max and now Amazon Prime Video. Everyone's coming out with a hybrid model. They have to have an ad-supported offering to really support that content investment. Plus, consumers, we only have so much time. We only have so much budget. We can't subscribe to all of these apps in terms of subscription fees. So we've seen on a Samsung TV, not only is there now more time spent in a streaming environment by audiences, but even within streaming, there's more time now being spent in ad-supported environments than there are ad-free environments. We saw in the fourth quarter of last year that there was a 55% increase in time spent prior to the fourth quarter of 2022 in consumers' time in ad-supported apps. For ad-free apps, it actually went down for one of the first times. It declined 7% in the fourth quarter of last year. So it's kind of a good news story, I guess, for advertisers, in that they can start re-aggregating their audiences. It's putting more inventory in the marketplace. But you also have the challenge of, you have certain consumers that are just in streaming. You have certain consumers, a smaller amount, are just in linear environments. And you have this big bubble in the middle where they're in both. And that's what makes it challenging, is where am I going to be able to find and reach my audience when they're navigating across all different platforms? So I think having data that helps you understand where you can find your consumer is critically important for the buyer.
Yeah.
Other thing that on top of it, what we are seeing, like you're saying, merging of the two different VOD versus ad-supported platforms. There are certain platforms now, they actually have a lot of premium VOD content. So now they are creating something called a front porch. So the VOD content is behind a paywall, but if you don't want to pay yet, so you can watch a bunch of, so this is what Mag is working with a lot of these providers, where we actually creating fast channels on top of it. So it's a front porch. So you watch all of that. And if once you are ready to actually get into the VOD, either you pay per episodic content or you pay the subscription. But there is a lot of free stuff available on top of it. So it's the same app. It's just when you log into the app, you get to the front porch, which gives you the free content, which is ad supported. And if and when you're willing to move into the next one, you can go to the first hybrid model or a fully zero ad model as well.
I'm curious,
So
are you seeing any geography specific interest in that type of
Europe
business
and
model?
the US, I'm talking about Europe and US.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love this term.
I cannot
front
tell the names
porch.
yet. I think we're going to announce that soon, but yeah.
Front porch does sound very American, though.
Yeah, so.
But I think you both make a really good point about the tolerance of consumers for advertising in these environments has changed. It's changed to what it was 5 years ago, and that's why we're seeing so many different types of kind of hybrid experiences evolve. But I think it also, for at
Tolerance
least,
gone down?
tolerance
Gone
has
up?
gone up.
Okay.
Yeah, for advertising,
Yeah.
as long as it's relevant, as long
Yeah.
as it's good, as long as it's not interrupting my experience.
Yes.
And as long as it feels like it's for me, which I think comes back to we've got to get the basics right in the way that an ad is delivered, and then also enhancing the targeting so that I'm like, yeah, okay, that ad makes sense for me. That's something that that resonates with
That is
my
extremely
needs.
important. The
Yeah.
targeting piece is extremely important.
Yeah.
And aside, the relevance, obviously makes it more sticky. But then, app owners are getting a lot smarter about, if you look at the FAST services,
I'm trying not to move. I'm trying not to move.
there's fewer ad pods, and the ad pods are less time. So from a consumer experience, it's much more,
Oh, it's me.
I don't know if the word tolerable is right, but you're willing to have that trade-off.
I think I mentioned this earlier, that the slate I was talking about, the pod. So we, again, not trying to plug it here, but do a plug here, but the idea is that, hey, we can compress the pod now. So it used to be, hey, every 8 minutes you see a 2-minute ad pod. Sometimes the ad is not filled, especially in digital TV, that is becoming more common, that the ad is not filled and you see that slate. We compress. So,
Help.
I'm not doing anything.
Not moving.
We compress. So instead of, let's say you can only fill 1 minute of it, so you compress the pod itself, start the content playing a little bit earlier. What that means is that at the end of the half an hour or an hour, you have a bigger pod there, which may be 5 or 7 minute long. Now you can repurpose it in different ways. You can actually push other content in there, or figure out a way to just promote some other content. You can actually run an infomercial. So there are monetization opportunities also available there if you actually do this. So going back to the user experience, as I said, I mean, if you figure out a way to remove the slate and show more relevant ads within the ad pod itself, this is going to lead to better user experience. They're going to stay longer. They're going to be more loyal. Yeah, and that's just good for everybody in the ecosystem.
One thing that we've seen some of our publisher customers trying to understand is ad tolerances when it comes to subsets of users. So, for example, do certain groups, do they have a higher tolerance of ads? Is it relevant to content? Is it relevant to time of day? Is it relevant to devices? Does it correlate back to the origination of how the user, joined the platform? Obviously, that requires a lot of very detailed data, but I find, when I think about the publisher, the poor publisher who's trying to make money here, and they're trying to maximize their revenue, I think that a personalized approach on a per user basis to things like ad load and getting ad preferences, also feedback. I watched this ad and they left, maybe we don't want to show this type of ad to this user anymore, is something that I think is really interesting for publishers to look into.
I've loved some of the more kind of experiential ad units that I've started to see across a number of different platforms where you can select the ad and you can even provide real-time feedback of was this relevant for me or not.
Yes.
So I'm excited to see where that goes, emerging ad units. Your question was about trends. There's so many trends. We've covered a lot of them. A few that I would highlight. One, I think that live inventory moving into CTV streaming environments and then monetizing that programmatically, that is the next frontier for us in the US specifically. So very excited to see that. Sustainable practices, I think, is another really interesting one, which we've started to see kind of spark conversation in the US last year, a bit more prevalent in Europe and APAC. But how can we reduce kind of the carbon emissions through the full kind of supply chain in terms of how an ad is delivered? I think that's an interesting kind of next step that buyers and brands are looking for and looking to their publisher kind of content partners to explain. Talked a little bit about supply path optimization. That's a really, really big one that I think is important.
I don't think it's a new trend. That actually has to happen. Supply path optimization makes the most sense, actually. Yeah. So that's just good for everyone in the ecosystem. You're not spending too much money. There are not a lot of middlemen who are just trying to take a cut somewhere in the middle. So publishers get the most value, the advertisers get the most value, the users are happy. So that makes the most sense. SPO.
Well, and I think on the issue of live stream data coming from networks and broadcasters is a huge trend. I mean, we're just on a Samsung, in our Samsung TV Plus environment. Think about what you can get from over the air, especially as people move from linear and different environments and viewing. That OTA content is now becoming available on these free ad-supported streaming services on a smart TV. So you're getting, in the case of Samsung, I think we have over 100 broadcast stations where I'm from Chicago. So I could see like 3 of my broadcast stations stream live right on my Samsung TV Plus. I can also get cable network news from my Samsung TV Plus. And I think we're also seeing more and more sports content move into that environment as well. I mean, during the NCAA college tournament, my go-to place was CBS Sports HQ on 24 hours in a fast, free ad-supported streaming TV environment. So when you weren't getting that coverage on your other sports networks, it was always there. So I think that content is becoming very much more premium, rich, and not only national, but local.
I want to second that. The single live events are becoming extremely important. And I think OEMs actually play the biggest role there, trying to make sure that you can actually navigate. So the concept of channels is going to go away or change to somewhere where, because these are not set channels. I mean, something is happening, and when you log into a Samsung TV next time, you're going to see, hey, these are the 5 other things that are showing up. They are not channels, and they're only there for the next 3 hours because the event is happening now. So different OEMs have a different approach on solving that. But yes, single live events are going to be the next frontier. I think you highlighted that, and yours accurately said that as well.
Yeah, very excited about the Olympics.
One thing I think you mentioned was, what was that, local versus national?
Yeah.
So this, if you are in the TV industry, national sports, and then you buy local sports and all of that, it's just, I don't know if that actually is relevant anymore. The lines are blurring too much. That national advertisers are buying locally because they can. With FAST, you can literally target every user. So there's no concept of a national spot that you're running. You are running it for the users that you are relevant. So back to your point that, hey, the audience is the key, the identifying which audience you're going to reach out to. So you're reaching out to those 3.25 million users out of the 80 million that you are showing an ad to, for which most of them are irrelevant anyway. So you're just reaching out to those ones. So that's becoming that whole national versus local spots are blurring. Now, locally, you can, again, the whole ecosystems have been built in TV universe, running national, and one of my previous companies, Cadent, was very big in buying locally and selling nationally, things like that. But yeah, I mean, that the shift is happening now because of this targeting. And then you can only target, you only want to target if you can measure effectively. So you can measure, you're not going to target, you can try it once and then you're going to move away from that. But because we have the data available now, you can measure effectively. So that whole concept of whether what you're buying local versus national spots is just irrelevant at this point. Not gone away completely, but it's going to go away very soon. Yeah.
And I feel like we'd be remiss to talk about trends without talking about AI. So how do we think AI might be influencing, cross-media platform buying?
I think last session was AI here.
Oh.
Guess, yeah.
Maybe we already covered it. Okay, great.
I think you alluded to machine learning anyways. Machine learning is part of AI,
Yeah.
so yeah, go ahead.
It's just going to be part of the fabric. It's just the evolution of the internet in terms of how we use it. It's part of everything.
One is the creative, essentially. I think there are multiple aspects to AI. I mean, one thing that is going to really affect is the creative process itself. You would focus on a production house who can only produce one creative and you run one spot. And then you hope that it's worked. I mean, it actually resonated with the entire audience that you're running it. Now we are doing individual targeting, so you need more creatives. I mean, you don't want to run the same creative over and over again. So how do you, maybe some of that actually Gen AI can actually produce multiple variations of the same
Have your
message that
favorite
you want.
celebrity show you this cleaning product that you want to buy.
Now with video also, Sora actually, I don't know if you saw you can produce video content as well. I know it's not there yet completely, but it's going to get there. Or you can actually work with it effectively and then create 5 different variations for 5 different audiences because you're running that campaign. Yeah, you don't need to run nationally. You can actually localize it with even some, accents or things like that. Again, that may be the next frontier. Maybe it's a little bit not politically correct, but yeah, maybe you can do that depending on what your needs are.
Yeah. So there's so much promise. I think for now, someone told me the other day that if you need a new headshot, there's like an AI tool that can, if you give them like 3 photos of you, they'll like create like.
They're great.
Of them now.
Yeah.
Tess.
I think they need to nail that first, and then we can get to the next bit.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I think we're finishing up here as a way to kind of bring this to a close. Obviously, we're here at NAB, and there's a lot of publishers here in the room. What should publishers be thinking about over this next year? What should they be working on to maximize, the benefit here from ad-supported experiences and the demands of cross-media ad buying?
I can start. I mean, I think as we see audiences increasingly move into a streaming environment, and as we see publishers having to deal with things like the churn challenge, I think making sure that you're partnering up with companies that have data that can help you, that can help you inform your content and ad strategies, but that also have ways to help you distribute your content wherever those consumers are, wherever they're consuming.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges, again, maybe somewhat controversial, is that one of the biggest challenges that publishers have faced is all these measurement models that come into play. It doesn't really work well with all the publishers. I mean, because every publisher is a little bit different. So one of the biggest challenges I think in the past have been that, hey, you're measuring me against all of the other folks. I mean, you meaning the buy side or whoever the independent measurement party is. But my stuff is a little bit different than the other one, but because I do it a little bit differently, or my content is a little bit different, or different type of content, and it's not apples versus apples, so you're measuring. So one thing that I think is the publishers should push for is more consistency in the measurement model, more understanding of what you are being measured against. So you are being measured against something that if you don't understand it very well, that's just going to be detrimental to your business in the long run. So you have to push for more consistency from the measuring parties, whoever is doing the measurement, and then you figuring out what those means, and if you have to change your business model, or not the business model per se, but how you're presenting stuff itself, so that it's in compliance with that measurement model, so that you are measured more effectively or more correctly, based on what your thought process is on that. That is going to be extreme. Yeah, go ahead.
I can speak to that, which is, we see all the time when measurement companies or analytics companies in general, when you're collecting data, the software, for example, the tag, the SDK, the pixel, whatever, is all built differently. You could be calculating session time differently. You could be identifying users differently. You could be, does, for example, time spent buffering or time spent in pause, how do those contribute something to, like consumption of content? Is that included or excluded in this vendor's measurement? And so I think I 100% agree with you and can attest that is a major issue. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you that question, actually. What are the biggest things that you see, in terms of data? Because you run a data company, so you tell us, what are the biggest trends that you see or biggest challenges for publishers?
I think that publishers want more access to data from their partners, first and foremost, especially on the advertising side. We see differences between different ad partners in the level of granularity of the insights that they have access to, the speed of data that they're, how quickly does the reporting data come in? And then some of the tools that they're also using can, how am I going to marry and harmonize this data together? And then further, and that's just between, maybe content consumption and understanding advertising. What was the CPM value of this ad for this user shown against this content, to do those sorts of understanding. So I think they want more data, they want it faster, and I think they want to spend less money on all of these services. So hopefully we start to see some consolidation of like requiring less third parties to be in the mix. Thank you.
And then I think from my side, a couple of things. One would be continuing kind of discussion around performance TV, how publishers can participate in kind of those styles of campaigns, how they're working with those types of advertisers. I think that's one. And then I also think just how they're harnessing their first-party data continues to be a really, really kind of important area of focus. Those are probably the two that I would double-click on.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. This has been great.
Questions?
Yeah.
I don't know. Any questions? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. No.